וידבר נא אל משה לאמור, דבר בני ישראל ויקחו לי תרומה מאת כל איש אשר ידבנו ליבו, תיקחו את תרומתי, וזאת התרומה אשר תיקחו מאיתם, זהב וכסף ונחושת ותכלת וארגמן ותולעת שני, ושש ועזים ואורות אלים, אדמים ואורות חשים, ועצי שיטים, שמן למאור, בשמים לשמן המשחה ולקטורת הסמים, אבני שוהם ואבני מילואים, לאפוד ולחושן, ועשו לי מקדש ושכנתי בתוכם, ככל אשר אני מראה אותך את תבנית המשכן ואת תבנית קוקיליו, וכן תעשו. Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, eternally grateful to be reporting to you from the eternal city, eternal capital, the holy city of Jerusalem here in Israel. It's a beautiful rainy day, another rainy day, and it's Rosh Chodesh, Adar, the amazing month of Adar, the happy, joyful month of Adar. We're going to be talking about that. Today is actually the 30th day of the month of Shvat, 30th day of Shvat, which is the first day of a 2-day Rosh Chodesh celebration. First day being the last day of the concluding month, and tonight, Tuesday evening, will begin the actual first day of the new month of Adar, the second day of Rosh Chodesh. And it's the 25th of February, the year is 2020. I neglected to say that the Hebrew year is 5780, and all is good because, first of all, it's Rosh Chodesh Adar, the month that we say, Mishenichnas Adar Marbeh B'Simcha. When the month of Adar enters, we increase our joy, and that is for a few reasons. The main focus, of course, being on the holiday of Purim, which is in mid-month, and we'll be mentioning that a little bit later. Also because it is the final month of the Hebrew calendar, the 12th and final month, and it is the month that precedes the first month being Nisan, which of course we learned a few weeks ago in the parashat Beshalach, that it's the first of our months. And of course it's the month of Passover, Pesach, the month of our liberation from Egyptian slavery. And so there's lots of preparation, both spiritual and practical, to be done in the month of Adar, both going back to temple times where there was a lot of practical preparations that need to be made for pilgrims who are going to be heading to the Mikdash, to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem for Passover. But even today, while we are still in a period between the Holy Temples, I'll call it, because the third Holy Temple has not yet been built, but still there's so much to be done, both spiritually and practically in order to prepare for Passover. But the other reason why I'm so happy today is because it is parashat Terumah. And parashat Terumah, which is what I read at the opening of the show, and I'm going to read it to you again in English in just a minute. It's parashat Terumah is it's the birthplace and the birth date of the Temple Institute, because parashat Terumah, what the verses I read are the raison d'etre for the existence of the Temple Institute. So it is a very, very special occasion for us as an institution, but also for all of Israel and for all the world, because it's all about, well, you guessed it, it's all about the Holy Temple. Let me read right now what I read in Hebrew a minute ago. And by the way, the Hebrew that I read, the cantillation, was, to the best of my ability, was the cantillation that is read in the synagogue when we read from Torah on Shabbat, and we also read from Torah in synagogue on Mondays and Thursdays, and of course on holidays, and on Rosh Chodesh, as in today and tomorrow. There's a special section that concerns itself with the offerings that are made on Rosh Chodesh, the offerings in the Holy Temple, and on fast days as well. But this is what I read just a minute ago, and now I'm going to read it in English. Hashem It's from chapter 25 of the book of Exodus, verse 1. I'm reading from verse 1 through verse 9. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and have them take to me an offering. From every person whose heart inspires him to generosity, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering that you shall take from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson wool, linen and goat hair, ram skins dyed red, tachash skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the incense, shoham stones and filling stones for the ephod and for the choshen. And they shall make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in their midst. According to all that I show you, the pattern of the Mishkan, tabernacle, and the pattern of all its vessels, and so shall you do." Yes, the first 9 verses of the chapter 25 of the book of Exodus is how we begin parashat Terumah, and Terumah means, translated donation, contribution. Actually, the word Terumah is from the Hebrew word laharim, which means to raise up. So when we bring something to the Holy Temple, we're raising it up. When we make a donation to a good cause, we're raising up that which we're giving. We're ennobling it with the purpose, the good purpose that we're using it for. The expression of raising up, of course, when we go to the Temple Mount, we do aliyah, we ascend. It's all about going up. When we go to Israel, we're making aliyah to Israel. We're ascending to Israel. So it's a very, very beautiful passage here. It's not just anybody who feels like making a contribution. It's anybody who wants to raise their being up, their existence up by taking of their property and dedicating it to this holy cause of building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which of course would later translate into the Holy Temple. The word for, again, Terumah is used here. It's translated as offering, which is a very good translation, very accurate to describe its purpose. But again, it is to raise up, and it's not the same word that's translated as offering when we talk about offerings on the altar. The word there is korban, which is from the word to draw near. So you see that these, almost mundane, when you translate them into the English, a donation, or sometimes an offering is translated even as sacrifice. But in the original Hebrew, it's a much more personal and much more provocative meaning. Laharim, to raise up, or lakarev, to bring close. And again, all these precious metals and stones and these beautiful dyed fabrics, etc., that God is calling on Israel to make a donation to the Harim, to bring, so that they can build a Mishkan, and they shall make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in their midst. V'asuli Mikdash v'shachanti betocham. The word Mikdash literally means sanctuary, and Beit HaMikdash is the holy temple, even though in the desert, the structure that they built was called Mishkan, which is from the word to dwell. V'shachanti betocham. That was the dwelling place where God dwelled amongst Israel. He didn't say, the verse doesn't say, V'shachanti betocho, as in, and I will dwell in it, right? In the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. No, I will dwell amongst you. And that is very revealing, because the whole reason why God wants this Mishkan, this Mikdash, this dwelling place, is to be close to his people Israel. That's been the whole thing that's been going on back and forth over the past few parshiot, the readings that we've been reading over the past few weeks in the book of Exodus. God wants to be, he's taken his people out of Egypt. He's taken Israel out of Egypt, and he said expressly, so that you'll be my people, and I will be your God. And what God means by that is that we will dwell together. We will live together. You will live with God's presence in your lives as individuals and as a nation, and God will live among you. God's presence will be close. So in order to create that reality, we have to create a reality in which a reality which is suitable for God's presence. And the beginning point that God mentions here is the Mishkan. Now, a week ago, we read parashat Mishpatim. And parashat Mishpatim, Mishpatim began with all these ordinances, all these civil laws, in which dealt with very, day-to-day mundane things. This one damaged property, and this one stole something, and some things aren't so mundane. This one murdered somebody, this one accidentally killed somebody. But these are civil laws. These are situations between man and man. And what God was expressing there was that even in, and especially in our relationships one to another, on personal levels, on legal matters, on civil matters, God can be there too. God can be there too if we follow and abide by these precepts, these ordinances, these mishpatim that God's laying out for us. Now, the whole concept, let's say, of the mishpatim follows the Mount Sinai experience, the giving of the Torah, in which God put on a big show with lots of lights and sound and thunder and smoke, etc., and basically presented his being in its fullness to the children of Israel, and even spoke to them in a way that they could hear and absorb. And this was God bringing his world close to our world, God bringing the heavens right down to the level of earth. And of course, that's the giving of Torah. And that was maybe the only way to do it, but it was terrifying for Israel. They stood back. They said to Moshe, "You talk to God from now on." They were a little afraid. After all, it was very, very, very intimidating. So God then took a different tact, and that was the Mishpatim. God said, "Okay, I get it. I'm a little overpowering, but in your daily life, you can also experience my presence by living according to these precepts." And now, the follow-up to that is this concept of a Mikdash, a Mishkan, a tabernacle/temple, in which God's presence can dwell among his people. Now, let's remember, we're up in the top of Mount Sinai right now, enveloped in a cloud with Moshe and with God. Because at the conclusion of last week's parashat, God invited Moshe up to speak with him alone, 40 days and 40 nights. So we are being privy to a private conversation. God is telling Moshe what he should tell Israel when he comes down from the mountain in another 40 days. So this is very fascinating. And in fact, when Moshe does come down from the mountain in another 40 days, he will tell Israel all these things we've just read. We're going to hear them all over again. So it seems like repetition, but of course Torah never repeats anything unless it is doing so for a purpose, which means that the repetition is giving us more understanding, more knowledge, a better concept of what's going on. So, but we have to bear in mind that right now this is all God speaking to Moshe, and we are like a fly on the wall, if there was such a thing as a fly on the wall, in the reality that Moshe was sharing with God at this time. It's today, it's a very common thing, in politics. All of a sudden, a recording comes out. Everybody's recording everything. So we had this conversation. This one denies, that one says he said, and then a recording comes out. It makes the news. All of a sudden, it was a big scandal because someone said something that they said they hadn't said. No, this is not like that. But we are being let in on this one-to-one conversation between God and Moshe, and there's a reason for that, and we're going to learn about that reason later. I would say later, in a few weeks from now. We'll get to the real nitty-gritty of why of why we're being let in on this private conversation. Now, we got Mount Sinai. We got the Mishpatim, the ordinances. We got the positioning that's going on here, God's presence, man's lives, trying to bring it all together. And now there's this new concept of a Mishkan, of a Mikdash, of a house, where God's presence can fit, as it were. And of course, Midrash, rabbinical understanding and explanation of the verses that we're reading from thousands of years ago, says that Moshe was perplexed. He said to God, how can it be? You're endless. There's no beginning and end to you. There's no physicality to you. How can we build a place, according to your instructions? How can we build something that you're gonna fit into and be present in? And of course, as the Midrash concludes, God says to Moshe, just don't worry about that. Just follow the instructions, basically. Put up a few pillars here, a few pillars there, and just stick to the plan. It's going to happen. Of course, the real key is that the verse says, "I will dwell among you," meaning this house, this Mikdash for God, while it is very much a physical thing, and while we go there to be near God's presence, it's sort of a construct. It's a way for us as limited people, as limited physical beings, to be able to draw near to this infinite, endless presence, and to feel that presence. And it's really more of an experiential thing than an intellectual concept, because the intellect can barely grasp this. When in this week's Haftarah, the additional reading from the prophetic readings that we read on Shabbat at the conclusion of the Torah reading, is from the book of Kings 1, chapter 5 and 6. And of course, Kings 1, chapter 5 and 6 is all about the building of the first temple, Solomon's temple. And it has very many beautiful details. But what we read on Shabbat doesn't include what I'd like to read here, because King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, had the same understanding that Moshe did, that there really is no such thing as a physical house that can contain God's presence. And he actually says, if we read in the book of Kings from chapter 6, verse 13, God says, or King Solomon is quoting God and saying, "And I will dwell among the people of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain you, much less this temple that I have erected. You shall turn toward your servant's prayer and to his supplication, O Lord my God, to hearken to the song and to the prayer that your servant is praying before you today, that your eyes may be open toward this house night and day, toward the place which you said my name will be there, to listen to the prayer that your servant will pray toward this place. You shall listen to the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel, that they will pray toward this place, and you shall hear in heaven your abode, and you shall hear and forgive. And to the stranger, and also to the stranger who is not of your people Israel, but will come from a far country for the sake of your name, for they shall hear of your great name and of your mighty hand and of your outstretched arm, and he will come and pray to this house. You shall hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calls you for, that all peoples on the earth may know your name, to fear you as do your people Israel, and that they may know that your name is called upon this house that I have built." So basically, King Solomon nails it. It is about connecting with God. That's what this house is. It is the house of connection between God and man. And so it is of the utmost importance, and it has to be here on earth so that we can relate to God. And so we have to make ourselves fit so that God can be present amongst us here on earth. And now I'm going to interrupt, but actually it's along the same subject. The Temple Institute, right now, at this very moment, we are inaugurating a campaign called Terumah 2020. And it is a campaign to raise funds for the Temple Institute. What better time to do it than during the parashat Terumah, where we're calling upon everybody whose heart has a spirit of generosity and wants to raise up themselves by doing something with a grand and glorious and holy purpose, and that is to help us to continue our work, the work of the Temple Institute. You know, we've been 33 years. We've been building, we've been teaching, we've been sharing the beauty and the truth of the Holy Temple with the world, and we want to continue our outreach, and it depends upon you because we're a nonprofit organization and our funding comes from you. We get maybe 1% of our budget from government ministries, despite what some left-wing rags sometimes claim here in Israel, that we're getting all sorts of money. It's not the case. You are the pillars of the Temple Institute. And when we take our break between part 1 and part 2 of the radio show, I am going to reveal our opening video, a short video, a 40-second video, to encourage people to give generously to the Temple Institute. And if you're watching this, listening to this, I imagine on YouTube, you can actually watch this short video, which will take place in just a minute, half a minute, I guess, as we conclude the first half of our show. And before I return to the second, here's the music. So, without further ado, here is our new Terumah 2020 campaign, and I'll be right back after that break. Thank you. For 33 years, the Temple Institute has been building and teaching and sharing the truth and beauty of the Holy Temple, striving to prepare Israel and the world for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, soon in our days.
The Temple Institute is a nonprofit organization. Our ability to continue our work and outreach depends upon you. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations."
Please support the work of the Temple Institute. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is still Yitzhak Reuven. It's still the 30th day of the month of Shvat. It's still the first day of Rosh Chodesh Adar, the new month of Adar. 2-day Rosh Chodesh began last night and will continue throughout tonight and tomorrow. And we've been talking about this week's parashat Terumah, which we'll be reading in Shabbat in Beit Knesset in the synagogue. And you just had the opening. You saw the opening premiere performance of our campaign video, Terumah 2020. I hope that it inspires you, and you're welcome to share that. Actually, we'll be posting these videos on our Facebook page, so that's an easy way to share it with other people who might be interested. Welcome to our world of doing everything we can in order to get ourselves ready and the world ready for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, what God discussed with Moshe in private. The first time they were alone together on Mount Sinai, this is what they talked about. God wants in. He wants into our world. And this is the way it can happen. Gather my thoughts. There's another aspect that I think will be revealing itself of God's introduction to this subject of the tabernacle at this early point, and I think it will become clear as we proceed through the upcoming Torah readings of Tetzaveh and Kitisa, and just to give you a little bit of a teaser, in Kitisa, of course, is the very, very dramatic debacle of the golden calf, which seems to throw a wrench in the works. But I'm telling you now, and I'm going to leave it at this, because I want to share it with you on time when it actually happens in our reading. I'm telling you this now that I think it's all part of a great plan to make the reality of the tabernacle / holy temple a reality. So hold on to that thought, and we'll be getting back to it in a couple of weeks, because from now on, the book of Exodus is almost exclusively going to be dealing with the subject of the tabernacle. That's how important it is to God. And it's actually going to get done. You know, that's another great lesson from this book of Exodus, that these things can happen. They can come true. God's dreams, God's wishes for us and for God can come true if we roll up our sleeves and make them happen. I mentioned earlier, it's Rosh Chodesh, Adar. Adar is that wonderful month that concludes the Hebrew calendar and precedes the month of Nisan, the time of the Passover exodus from Egypt. And of course, on the 14th of the month of Adar is Purim, which we can read about in its source book, the book or the scroll of Esther, which is contained in the section of the Hebrew scriptures known as the writings. And of course it takes place in ancient Persia, which is modern-day Iran. And of course the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, was very ambivalent toward the Jews who were exiled, had been exiled from Israel by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, who later was conquered, and Koresh took over, and Koresh told the Jews they could go back and build the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and 42,000 Jews went back, and they began building, but there's all sorts of political problems, and so the building's being held up, and that's the time frame of Purim, and the story of Esther and Mordechai and the evil Haman, and the whole feast which opens up the book of Esther. And without getting into more detail about that, because we have time to talk about in upcoming weeks, the source of the joy which fills Adar is the fact that when things look so hopeless and down and on the edge for the Jews, that there was a sudden upturn and an overturn, and all of a sudden everything changed, and it looked bleak because we weren't seeing where God was leading this, because God was working behind the curtains, as it were. And that's one of the real important lessons of Purim, that even though sometimes we don't always understand how God's working things in the world, and we don't always see his presence or feel his presence, he's always there. And things will be okay if we also make sure that we're present. We have to be there also, and that's the other lesson of Purim, that you have to be on the ball, you have to be a team player, you have to be on Team God, you have to be on Team Israel in order to make things happen. So that is the preeminent source of joy that fills the month of Adar. Of course, the other joy which I've mentioned is all the preparations that we're making now for the upcoming Passover. I mentioned last week that during the month of Adar was when they would collect throughout the land of Israel. They would collect the machatzita shekel, a half shekel. I mentioned that that donation can be made today to the Temple Institute. If you want to make a half shekel donation, I mistakenly said last week the value was $5. I was corrected by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, the head of the Temple Institute, who said it's a $12 donation, the half shekel donation. In today's currency, U.S. currency, is the equivalent of $12. Some people have made the donation already. If you make a donation through our donation page on our website or via the Facebook page, there's also a donation link. Just designate somewhere that it's for the half shekel, and we will attribute it as such. And of course, the half shekel in temple times went for the purchasing of the daily public offerings, as well as for repair work when necessary in the Holy Temple. And of course, your donations to the Temple Institute, whether they are half shekel donations or via our Terumah 2020, you can also designate to what purpose, to what project you want it to go to. And of course, it goes to our main goal of teaching and preparing. And preparing means also building the vessels. Of course, we've built many, if not most, if not all of the vessels required. They're kosher, they're fit for use in the Holy Temple once it is built. We have even written up architectural blueprints for the Holy Temple. We're getting everything lined up so that when the people of Israel decide the time has come, and then we can just have no excuses. We can't say, well, time has come, but we got to start. We'll be prepared. And you can be part of it by helping us out. Anyway, just one other thing. In these exciting times, the Temple Institute's international department, which is us, we are relaunching a brand new website. Our website, which hopefully you're familiar with, has served us very well for the past 15 years, maybe 16 years even, and it is just chock full of information and images and pictures and all sorts of things. It's massive, and it's gotten a bit chaotic and also a bit archaic because so much of the technology on the web has changed. So we are doing a radical update, and we are going to be making the new website live over the next few days. And I will say this, it's going to go live, and we haven't even been able yet to upload all our old content onto the new site, but that's our intention. We're working on it day and night. Even as I'm talking, someone's working on it. And there'll be glitches, and there'll be, you'll bear with us. Have patience, and by all means, you are welcome and encouraged to write to us. Send us an email if there's something missing that is your favorite thing or that you're interested in, or if you see something that seems askew, because we're working very hard to get everything up as quickly as possible and in order so that it'll all be very accessible and helpful to people who want to learn more about us, but mainly to learn more about the Holy Temple, what it was, what it will be, etc., etc. In other news, the Temple Mount. The numbers just keep growing. Jews are going up in more and more numbers. More and more rabbis are endorsing the Aliyah, the ascent to the Temple Mount. More and more Israelis, Jews from all across the spectrum of Israel are going up. It's becoming central to the Jewish/Israeli concept of who we are, our identity as a people, as a nation, as God's people. And of course, it's always intended to be central. That's what we're reading about right now in the Torah. But in modern times, it because of the 2,000 years of the galut, of the exile, and the 2,000 years that we haven't had a holy temple, and all the political upheaval and social upheaval that took place, even as the modern Israel, was coming into being, and going from mechayil, strength to strength, even the concept of the reality of the Holy Temple, the reality of the Temple Mount and the Temple were kind of being pushed to the side for various reasons, some nefarious and some not so nefarious, but understandable. But no, that's changed, and again, I have to take credit, not for myself, but on behalf of the Temple Institute, which was really pioneer. 33 years ago, we were a voice in the wilderness in terms of raising temple consciousness, and now it's become much bigger than the Temple Institute, which is a blessing. And there are many, many individuals and organizations who are now very active. One of those individuals who actually used to be a director for a number of years of the Temple Institute, we've been reading about because we've been posting stories about Yehuda Glick on our Facebook page. And, the perverse attitude of the police. He was walking too slowly, they said, in the Temple Mount, so they arrested him and investigated him and banned him from the Temple Mount. Well, the ban has been rescinded. He was back on the Temple Mount today. And, we've been reporting of all the positive changes on the Temple Mount, the much friendlier, much more accommodating, much more embracing attitude by the police toward a Jewish worshipers who go up to the Temple Mount. That's all true. But there are still glitches and still some backsliding by the police along the way. And the point is we can't let that overshadow the good progress, but we also can't let it go by, because we have to make sure things are moving in the right direction. And the right direction is, a prayer on the Temple Mount, a house of prayer for all nations. I mean, there's nothing more basic than that, nothing more natural than that, and nothing more conducive and necessary for peace. This concept that's been foisted upon us by interested parties, political and otherwise, that the Temple Mount is a powder keg, it's going to be that's going to ignite World War III. It's a bunch of nonsense. Let people pray. Let people pray on the Temple Mount openly. Okay, respectfully, side by side, openly, and you'll see, prayer will, peace will grow. Peace will grow naturally, like a flower. I'm getting very poetic. Like a flower it'll grow, because it's what's supposed to be. The prophet Haggai says, "In this place I will establish peace." It's not hocus pocus. It's not. It's reality. It's reality. It's reality that is prefigured here in parashat Terumah. Build me a place. Build me a sanctuary. Build me a house. Build me something where people can all congregate around my presence and communicate with me. And like Solomon said, hundreds of years later, when he built the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, he said, God, hear our prayer, hear the prayer of Israel, hear the prayer of the other nations. That's what it's all about. It doesn't get more basic than that. In other news in Israel, next Monday is elections. Yes, the third elections for government of Israel in the past year. And again, many are predicting another deadlock. And it's a very, very, even more crucial perhaps than previous elections, in that there's so much on the line right now. I mean, the deal of the century, which immediately empowers Israel to annex the Jordan Valley, crucial to Israel's territory and security and prosperity, as well as annexing the Israeli settlements, towns and cities all along Judea and Samaria, making the residents of these places and their towns, putting them under the exact same civil law that the other Israelis enjoy on the other side of the so-called Green Line. All that can happen, within days, within weeks of a new government, if it's a government that's right-wing in nature, because I don't think that a left-wing government is so interested in these things. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, part of his campaign, of his political campaign, has been all sorts of promises. And there's all sorts of building being authorized for Jerusalem, for Ma'ale Adumim. Just today, 3,000 buildings in Ma'ale Adumim. And you may have heard of E1, a very important piece of land that gives territorial contiguity between Ma'ale Adumim and Jerusalem. Up till now, it has been empty, as many American governments have blocked any development there, but the Trump administration has given Israel the green light. There's a lot of things on the line here, a lot of internal issues in Israel on the line, so it's a very crucial election. I know I'm voting for. I'll keep it to myself because we're not a political radio station here, but we need a government that will continue to promote the interest of the nation of Israel, the Jewish character of the nation of Israel, and the land of Israel, the territorial integrity of the land of Israel, and the continued ingathering of the children of Israel, and the continued social cohesion of all these different ingatherings. Wonderful things have been happening in Israel over the past years, and we want that to continue. I want that to continue. So I know who I'm voting for, and God willing, we'll have a positive result. And so the election is actually going to be on next Monday, which is the 6th day of Adar, but the counting of the votes will be taking place in the evening of next Monday, and that will already be the 7th of Adar, which is a very, very important, special, propitious day for Israel, because that's the day that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our master, was born on, the 7th of Adar. It's also the day upon which he died, on the 7th of Adar. There's a concept in Judaism that the righteous who have lived their lives fully and have full years of life, that the day of their birth and is the same date as the day of their death, of their passing on into the next world. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our master, was born on the 7th of Adar, and in fact, it's understood that that's why Haman, the evil villain from the Purim story, chose Adar as the month that he foresaw the demise of the Jewish people, because he said Moses died in this month, so it's a bad month for Israel. But what he didn't know is that Moses was born in this month, so it's a good month for Israel. So he went down like the rest of them who tried to destroy Israel one way or another. Anyway, Israel is here today, alive and well. We still have some enemies in Iran, which used to be Persia, used to be called Persia, and they seem to be more and more preoccupied with their own local troubles, and we in Israel are moving along toward our destiny, God willing, and the world is moving along with us. So once again, parashat Terumah, which begins with those verses that I shared with you, and again, right after the description, or after the instruction to build a Mikdash, a dwelling place for God, we have the instructions for the Aron HaBrit, for the Ark of the Covenant, and then for the menorah. These are all amazing, amazing, amazing new developments in the life of Israel, and become iconic in the understanding of our relationship with God and what it's all about. And of course, over the next few weeks, we're going to be presenting a lot of these photos of a lot of these very same implements and vessels, holy vessels, sacred vessels that the Temple Institute has created and that we have in our exhibition in Jerusalem's Old City. We'll be sharing them with you online. And it's a very exciting time of year for us because, like I opened the show with, this is what we're all about. This is our raison d'etre, and this is our focus. And it's not a niche, because the Holy Temple and the dwelling place for God, where He can dwell amongst us, is central to every other aspect of Judaism, every other aspect of Torah, every other aspect of how we understand the world, our reality, our relationship with God. So it is very, very central. Here's the music. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really hope you'll join us via our Terumah 2020 campaign, which will be running over the next few weeks. Chodesh Tov. Have a wonderful, wonderful, joy-filled month of Adar. Thank you again. Temple Talk.